Hey. Well, thank you for taking the time out to come out and see us. I wanted to share a bit of story about the Home Depot, specifically around what we've done over the last 5 to 7 years about building in agile practices, around how we defined what we wanted to change, how we drove change and how we made change, and then touched on what those things were and explained what that was overall. So it's been a fairly long journey. I hope you're excited as I am about it. I think we've done fantastic stuff and wanted to share some of the information out there. So, first of all, who am I? 20 years in IT, done supply chain, e-commerce, agilist, technologist, love test automation or anything automation based, and I just enjoy being changing and doing transformation in companies and making adjustments. Obviously, I've got to talk about Home Depot. If you don't know who Home Depot is, well, they've got a lot of good stuff for you. We're the largest home improvement retailer in the US, Canada and Mexico. A member of the Dow, we've been around since 1981. So where do you start? The first question always in everything is like, how do you actually get things going? So I'm a big fan of Hakan Force. His work is fantastic. I'm usually the guy with the wheels on the side explaining to the development team, hey, I've got some cool ideas. Do you want to try some stuff? And they're always too busy and they always want to run off and do other things. It's a very painful conversation. Everyone's always too busy. So you've got to start figuring out why you've got to get change to begin. That's probably the hardest part, depending on your context, depending on your environment, and depending on how you work in your area. But you've got to define the why, because without the why, you're never going to have an emotional connection of what is important and how it will make a change in what you do. If you don't know who Simon Sinek is, I highly recommend his videos out there. 36 million people have seen it. Fantastic material. Talks through why it's important to start with the why, because it helps give you a connection. Most adult learning is all about the why. If you explain why something is important, you can then hold on to it, understand it, and value what it means to you and how it goes. So for me at Home Depot, I had to start defining the why. First why for me was cost of handoff. So we've all been there in a environment where you do waterfall delivery, right? So you typically have a developer, he writes his code and they've got some spec that they won't let you see if you're in a quality mind like myself. And then once they're done, they hand it over, then you're like, well, what did you give me? You learn, you test it, and then you hand it back over, you refix it, and you keep doing this for about 6 cycles or so. And you keep rinsing and repeating all the time. So my experience in the internet connected retail space was we did this a few times, doing an upgrade of our website, adding in the buy online, return in store. And then we did this with pickup in store, and then again on buy online and ship to store. But we started to learn on those last 2 ones towards the last one, where in actual fact it's better if you actually reduce the handoffs, if you start actually integrating in and working closer. So that was when we started our journey of understanding waterfall. This is way back like 2011, 2012. I called it Wagile. Apparently now it's called Water Scrumful. But what we found is as you started to inject it all the way in, you realize on the backside of things that the cost of handoff over longer initiatives or any kind of initiative actually costs you a lot more money to drive value to customers, associates and people and things that you want to delight with the software that you're trying to build and deliver. So we could have done it faster. So that's a good why. The other one is the cost of quality and delay. How many times have we been there where you've got a software developer who says, and I write code as well, but your code's sitting on there, it's on the shelf, you're like, well, why is my code taking so long, right? It should be in production. So I know a lot of the conversation here at CA World has been around DevOps, how you drive the practices around all of that, we'll get into that. But that is all the hard work. The easy work is not just cooking in the kitchen, it's all the cleaning, the tidying up, serving the food, making sure everyone's okay, is it hot and everything else, right? Writing code's the same thing. That's the easier part, somewhat, right? But everything else to get it out the door is what really matters. So you've got to define what the cost of delay is. Another good one is the cost of quality and defects, right? All the things that come from bad code being delivered and all the things that occur actually on a traditional life cycle causes an awful lot of problems because you end up having to refix, and that just delays everything along the way. So obviously focusing on how you can start to integrate writing app code and test code together. The cost of quality and defects can actually slow down and actually make things take a lot longer to get feedback from customers. It can take longer to get code out the door, and it doesn't drive value. So I'm a big lean thinker. I like lean XP, pick your favorite flavor of agile. Mary and Tom Poppendick do a really good example around different descriptions around why for wastes. So you can go through those to help in your description of why. And I use these through the various years to at least articulate to development teams not what the cost of quality is, but rather why is development costing us so much, which is a bit of a different conversation when you turn it around. So understanding the why, when we start reflecting what we've done, it starts to come back to really three things. First, we had a whole process of moving from waterfall to agile, water scrumful. More recently, over the last few years, we've been more XP and Kanban focused. We've retooled, realigned the quality team. Yes, I'm a traditional QA guy, developer, and so on. We've moved into doing a different way of working where we're starting to pair write test code, write app code, and work that through with a lens of exploratory testing. And then obviously continuous delivery. We're a publicly traded company. It is not easy, as I'm sure you know, to take a publicly traded company and enable some form of continuous delivery model. It's quite easy if you're a new company, not easy if you're a more of a historical company. So top two are hows, and the last one is what. So I tried to follow at least Simon Sinek's information from the why, hows, and whats, right? So the first thing from the process, we were a classic waterfall shop. It took forever to get code out the door, and we all know that that's not a good model. Obviously came from the electronic world, airplane making, building from a hardware perspective and everything else. I found and I figured out that doing more of a agile method, which apparently became water scrumful, went through all the same pains everybody else has around. Now you've got 2-week sprints, which is just really 2-week mini waterfalls, with the excitement of, hey, development waits to the very last day to deliver it, and you're still suffering the ignominious enjoyment of, well, what did you actually deliver and learning it all, and then having to figure it out and then test it all, and they all want it done straight away. But you then got separations, and that's still a handoff, and that's bad. So, the next phase was really starting to figure out, well, how do you actually change your world, right? So we dove more into extreme programming practices, extolled by Kent Beck. There's a really good book, Extreme Programming Explained, 2nd edition. If you don't have it, go get it. It's a really good one. And then Kanban Principles. And that really started to revolutionize our thinking about how you build software with quality in mind. Because no longer are you starting to think about, hey, how do I write code and then test code? Classic lean thinking, Deming says that testing is not a separate phase. You actually start to do it together. And the evidence I have from all the experience I've had from the teams I've worked for, run for, and helped and so on is you actually deliver code a heck of a lot faster. So that conversation of saying, hey, I'm waiting for code to be deployed, actually becomes a lot faster from the beginning to the end, because the magic isn't that you've built your code. The magic is you've built your code and it's in production, it's working, and it's exciting people. That's what matters. So by driving pairing, test-driven development, and other practices, that helped us change and reframe our thinking around how we actually build software, grow software. On the other side of the house, we did some Kanban work, which is more, at least for my area, is more on the support side of the house, because that's more about the flow, how you figure out the tickets and so on. And that's been a massive game changer for us and around how we deal with things, which is really a people problem around how you work and get your work done. It's made us far more productive, far more able to get things done. So that really just talks around the process. Retooling and realigning a quality team. Okay, I took on a traditional quality assurance team, and we've had a lot of fun through the years. It was manual testing beforehand, right? And it was like, okay, you deliver your code, and then you take a long time to figure out how to get it tested manually. It takes long cycles. Obviously, I jumped on the same bandwagon as everybody else. Let's do automated testing. So picked up your favorite Selenium, your favorite tool out there. The first tool I really liked was ITKO, which is now CA Lisa, the virtualization. Fantastic piece of software. It helped us break the seams around the different legacy stacks. Because that's the hardest part if you do testing and checking everything, is the fact that you have so many things connected together. It's hard to break the seams in between and figure out where you can start and stop and end. So that really was a massive game changer from my experience around driving that change around, hey, now you can start to break things down and break down the monolith. Been pushing more development and coding. So, so the gentleman on the panel prior, I thought it was quite funny. They were talking about quality engineering and so on. I've been pushing that for, about 4 or 5 years now. Obviously SDETS from Google is the other moniker, but the reality is it's actually changing the roles around how we work. No matter what environment you're in, if you have a different role and you're not actually doing the same work together, it becomes a handoff, and that, as we know, is bad, and that's not a good thing. So we've been working a lot around training and retooling to build the development skills around how to write test code and build test code with the development teams and help them and make them understand. And quite frankly, now we're actually more in the world of where we're starting to actually write app code and test code with them, but we have the testing mindset. Most people, as you know, if you code and develop, you think in a certain way, you think in a logical thing. As soon as you hear a problem, you'll start figuring about the process and what that thing is and want to work the logic. As a quality-minded person, I usually think about the outside and the periphery first. What are the inputs, what are the outputs, and how do I write those tests to then go figure that out? And that is where the fun and the charm comes. So through the years, we've played with different test tools. Got to do a shout out though for the CA service virtualization. That was the piece that really got me started with Selenium and really helped from a direction around what we did, what we got done, and helped us get a lot faster. I remember some of the math. I think when we first started doing test automation, it used to take us around 356 hours to run everything end to end. Now we can run most things in less than 15 minutes. At least from the .com side, and in the other areas we've been growing that quite large across the company now, which has been a fantastic story around how we speed up development and give good feedback into development. Continuous delivery, wow. You can't do this if you don't do the hard work of all the test automation, right? It's impossible to do it unless you've got some form of test automation. The other part is obviously having a good infrastructure stack or an IaaS or something behind the scenes, somewhere you can deploy in demand, but if you don't have test automation, you can't do continuous integration, you can't get to continuous delivery, and then forget about continuous deployment, you're not going to go anywhere. It's a very, very hard challenge. So, for those in a publicly traded company, you know that solving this conundrum is not easy, because you have regulatory constraints and things you have to make sure that as a collective whole you're doing the right things for the shareholders and doing the right thing as a company. So over time we've come up with this idea, and it's a bit different than the rest of the companies I've spoken through all the years. And I actually, if anybody's interested, this is a complete self-help, but if you want to get involved, yeah, I'm actually trying to get some of the tools we've done open sourced anyway, but I would love to get some engagement and help around this. But we basically built a stack to track and trace through all the different systems. Versus us worrying about how a change went through, we're focused on the collection of all the data elements around how that change occurred. So basically you built a mesh around it all, you then make sure the integration points, so as a change from the point of development goes through, you then have full tracking and traceability all the way through the life cycle. So when you have a change going to production, you know what the code repository, the repo was, who the developers were, what they did, when they did it, how it did, when, and how long it took to go through. That's a fantastic level of traceability you can have to be able to run and drive things from a continuous delivery perspective. Recently, last week, we actually did a live demo on stage, kind of like this, just internally, and it got tweeted out. And then it got picked up because we actually did it in 15 minutes and deployed to over 1,000 stores, which is a crazy thing to think about. 1,000 stores for a change, right? This is Home Depot. We're a technology shop. We also sell an awful lot of hardware and stuff to make homes, build houses, and help you build your home improvement projects. That got picked up by some people. Jez Humble, if you know the industry, I was pretty excited. For me, it's like I've hit a certain point in my career. I was pretty excited about that. So as a part of that, we've been obviously pushing on scale. Home Depot is obviously a big company. We have a lot of IT in-house. We have a lot of development teams and so on building things. The stuff we've built from an inner source perspective actually started and drove a conversation around, rather than having a, building things from what we were being instructed to do, give space to certain teams to allow them to start doing more open source internally. So this to me was exciting because we were starting to be able to build tools to support the things we needed to get done based upon our context. I'm sure as you're going to go through in your environment, as you go through and figure out how you solve these conundrums, you've got to figure out what's right for you, what makes sense for you. Whether you pick a third-party package solution to support you, or whether you build some things to help you. From our side of the house, some of the things we had to build around the continuous delivery was in-house, because it wasn't in the market, it doesn't exist. So we built it and we grew it, and we've got quite a lot of people getting their code changes and so on, and we're looking to open source that in the future. So I've kind of run through this fairly quickly, but hopefully this is a fairly condensed conversation. I believe in more Q&A and conversations, so I don't know if anybody has any specific questions or they want to ask around.